So, this can kind of be, like a segment 1.5 between these two because I do, whether it's Mayo, Mazzulla, Craig Breslow, I think we are seeing a lesson in why you cannot hire unqualified administrators of your team. And I know in sports, when it comes to players, a lot of it is paying for future performance. In with athletes, if you pay for past performance, you're going to get burned. Obviously, with coaches, with executives, you can't do that. You cannot bring in people who are not qualified for the roles that they are being hired for. You need to have experience in those jobs. And Missoula, perfect example. You learn how to adjust to those things in game through experience. You can know the spreadsheet and you can know what the number says about these number of shots per game and how it evens out over the long haul. But in order to know what to do when something is not working, you need experience to do that. Gerard Mayo, you can have an overall philosophy about how you're going to build your football team. But when it comes to actual things about like how you're going to structure your summer optional training activities, like you need the experience to know what you're supposed to do in those off-season things. And Craig Breslow, you can know how you want to set up the chart of your organization, that you want Andrew Bailey here and so and so directing this or that, and here's the position that you want. And Logan's gone as usual. When I start making a point, Logan dips. But like when it comes to a conflict with your star player and how moving his position twice in 2 months might piss him off, like that's the experience piece that like you need to know. You need to gain that and not realize that like oh yeah, these are human beings here and these are egos that I'm moving around. And it's not just something where I can like conceptually put it down on like my iPad or whatever and show it off to my boss.
Yeah, and I think the Breslow and Mayo things are kind of comparable in the sense that like you assume that a lot of their inexperience they could make up for with the fact that like they've been in the game, they played right. With Mayo, you're like it's a lot of inexperience, but he's been around. He had time around Belichick. He played a lot. Like that has to account for something, right? And with Breslow, you'd think like you're like, yeah, he's another one of these super nerds, and you worry about if he like looks at the team as an algorithm, but you're like, he still should be able to have the human touch and the baseball understanding necessary because he freaking played the game. And then you have a situation like this where there was such with the Devers thing where there was such little tact or little understanding for like the human emotions in play, and it's just surprising that it comes from a guy who played the game. And I think Devers even alluded to that in his comments. He was like, he played the game. He should know maybe, or I think he said something like maybe it was a different game then than it is now, but he should know that this isn't that easy.
The thing that's funny is like that stuff matters so little to the players and the people that you're leading. Um, and it's just like we as adults, if you're managing someone or you're coaching someone or whatever, you think like, oh, you and I, we come from kind of a similar background, we know this or that, like they I have some uh they might have some built-in respect for me. No, like they they just look at like Rafael Devers just looks at Breslow as some old guy, and like the Patriots just looked at Mayo as a coach. It's not like, oh, this guy knows where we're coming from. Like no, these are 25-year-old people who think everyone older than 30 is an old man. And it's like, no, I don't. There's no connection here. You're just a guy,
Well, and
and
yeah,
so
well, I think maybe they 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 maybe look up to them or respect them for that stuff when they're 0-0 or during
right.
the preseason, right? Like I remember, before the Patriots first game, or might have been right after the first game, Gerard Mayo did some sit down video podcast with Devon Godshaw. And Devon Godshaw's talking about like, man, we'd run through a wall for you. We'd all go to war for you. Like having a player or having a coach who was a player means so much, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't take too long for none of that stuff to matter, right? And you start, and by the end of the season, there was enough intel on the Patriots to know that the players truly like we're done with Mayo, right? So that stuff, and maybe the same with Breslow or whenever you have this kind of thing, it's all good and it all makes for easy stories and easy content and stuff when the team is all optimism's high during the preseason, but when the shit hits the fan, to your point, none of that stuff matters.
Well, it's interesting too because like as far as Breslow is concerned, he is about as far from a one-to-one comparison to Devers as you could get.
Right, he's
Like
a swaggy left-hander,
he essentially played in a different era. He was a depth reliever who had some very good seasons. Um, and I just think about through the lens of like if I started working for a 60-year-old guy who's a newspaper lifer and I've only worked in digital media, I might be like, well, I'm glad that this guy has a lengthy journalism background, but that's about where it stops if he's only been in newspapers. So I understand that from Devers' standpoint. I'll say, I mean, I've been pretty consistent on this. I've got no issues with Devers in this. I think he was right to be annoyed by them telling him to spend all off season resting his shoulder / get ready to play third, and then 2 days before spring training sign Alex Bregman. Like, even if you think that is the right roster move and it's obviously proving to be so, I can understand how a guy who is supposed to be your franchise cornerstone would feel a little burned by that.
Hold on. I just want you might have been speaking hyperbole. You said you have no issue with Devers doing what he's doing?
As certainly, so I had more issue with his response to being a DH, but I didn't think he was necessarily wrong for feeling that way. I thought he should have just acquiesced, which he did. I think it would be easier for everybody, including the Red Sox in particular, if Devers just started taking grounders at first and saw what happened. At the same time, this is a guy that you are like, I'm not saying you should treat your franchise cornerstones like they can do no wrong and like they can walk on water. That has proven to be a very big problem in the NBA. At the same time, I think there's a certain way that you have to treat people that you shouldn't be trying to cycle your number one player through 3 different positions within 6 weeks of the season. That means you didn't plan. Like, this is on Breslow. And that's where I most certainly agree with Devers is it's like, what? Like, find another option. Why are you trying to make your $300 million player be the one to fix the issue that everyone knew you had in the offseason because you had an injury prone first baseman? And go figure, he got hurt, and you have no viable option to back him up. Nick Sogard last night was the best I've seen any guy play first for the Red Sox in the last 10 days. And above all else, the thing that drives me up the wall about all of this is we've spent 8 years railing on Devers' defense and how bad he is at third base. And then suddenly this guy's supposed to be the savior at first base and everyone's mad at him because he doesn't want to play defense. He got castigated every day for how he played defense.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I just think saying having no issue with him whatsoever is a tad aggressive. Like, I 1000%, if we're like building a pie chart of like who is most like who's being the biggest douche in this situation, I think Devers is less than 50%, but he's not in that pie, if that makes any sense. I do think that I yes, there's a roster construction. I think there is a fundamental. You guys don't understand nuance, so I know you guys now will say, "Oh, Ben hates Breslow because I point out specific,
No,
tangible reasons
John,
that Breslow
John
is."
John does not understand nuance. I'm a
Oh
man
my
of
God.
nuance. I am a man of nuance.
But like I think I put the biggest, maybe not the most part of that pie on Breslow, but I think the biggest portion of that is on Breslow. I 1000% agree with you there. To say that Devers is not a big piece of that though, like I know it, but it's a team sport. You're a team player. Like the team is going to be much better even with his questionable defense at first base by the ability to get another bat who's not Romy Gonzalez or Abraham Toro, the lawnmower man, into the lineup. So I just don't think that Devers is not not culpable in some way for this.
I mean, all right. So there's two parties involved. So obviously he is at least
Well,
culpable in
there's more
some
than
way.
two
Like I
parties.
said,
There's multiple. Like, yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure. But as we're talking about the Breslow Endeavors thing, um, yeah, I mean, my thing is just like Devers looks like a dick because he's the only one being honest publicly right now. Like he is
Yes,
the only one
yes.
who is saying exactly how he feels about this situation. And I feel like in the media in particular and fans too, people so badly want candor. And then he finally gives it, and we're
Yep.
railing against the guy for like even if he acquiesced to that, he would have every right to be pissed, as he has been about DH. And he got killed the first 2 weeks of the season because he was so goddamn bad, and he finally figured it out. And now we're trying to upend it again just so you can put this guy through the ringer again. Like,
Yeah.
why, as an organization, the guy who's supposed to be the face of your franchise, why are you doing this to him?
Yeah.
Why are you putting him in this position when you could have signed a $800,000 backup first baseman in December?
Yeah, and sorry, Dakota. I know. I hope you're enjoying the show. And I
It's
will
nice
say
to have him
the
just
person
sit
who
there
is
and
being,
listen for a
in my
change.
opinion, is being the least honest through this situation, and that's why I say there's more than just two sides. I think the least honest person in this situation
Cora.
is Alex Cora. I think Cora is just he's backing away. He does not want to get, but like I think that like you want to go way back, just as it relates to first base. Why did they not have Devers start trying to work out at first base in the offseason? Because they didn't want to piss off Tristan Casas. So he's another kind of piece of this pie that then relates into Cora and Breslow in not doing their jobs as the head of baseball operations and the manager of managing that, knowing Casas would get not quite pissed off maybe, but he would get his panties in a bunch if he saw someone else working out at his position, and now they're paying for that. So like, and now Cora is just kind of like, hey, John Henry, Sam Kennedy, you guys handle this now. Welcome to sunny Kansas City. You're absolutely right about the candor piece of it. Sorry, go ahead, Dakota.
Well, no, I think that the part about Alex Cora is like, I think it's because if he did speak honestly, it would confirm what we all know, which is that him and Craig Breslow aren't on the same page about a lot of things. So there's that. I think ultimately, like, three things can be true in this. Devers is acting like a douche a little bit. What Logan is saying is true, but you could say that about every player. It doesn't mean you should always do full candor through the media. So he's acting a little bit like a douche. Learning first base is not that difficult. It is for some guys, but a guy who played a quarter infield spot, like, it's not that difficult. I saw Mike Lowell, I think he was on Bradford's podcast, and I put stock into like players like that, and he was saying like it's the easiest one to learn, like it's not that bad. So all that's true, and then but what also is true is that the Red Sox handled this terribly. Yeah, obviously, like at all levels. So I don't blame Devers at all for feeling the way he does. But like, to kind of circle back to your original point about Breslow and his inexperience, Ben, I think you that stuff really shines when there's inconsistency, right? So it's like there are so many good things he's done. A lot, from trades to overhauling the pitching development infrastructure, where a lot of people focus on what's happening on the big league team, but like their talent pitching wise in the minors now. Like the narrative has completely changed from like the Red Sox can develop pitching prospects, and we still have to see these guys come up in the big leagues, but they're in a better place right now from a pitching talent through the organization than they've ever been. There are stories like, someone like Shane Drohan, who like 3 years ago was an ascending pitching prospect for them. Then he really regressed, and this was still when Bloom was around. Then last year he got picked in the Rule 5 draft, ended up reverting back to the Red Sox. He had no value. They overhauled his fastball and everything in the offseason, and now he's like back up into being a borderline top 20 prospect for them. So like he's done a lot of these really good things that I think he gets full credit for, but not having real depth at first base, not planning for that, not building into the roster clear pathways for Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer. We talked about this last week. Like they don't have really any logical way of getting those guys on the roster unless, in the case of Anthony, if Devers goes to first, then that solves it a little bit. But beyond that, like you'd have to either demote or trade one of David Hamilton or Ceddanne Rafaela, and you don't want to do that. And that's because they didn't think about this, I think, proactively enough in the offseason to build in pathways for those two guys. So they're just kind of stuck. So I think those are just, to your point, like, I don't know if it's an experience, if it's just people in the organization not being on the same page where, it's just not all Breslow's call. Like, I don't know, obviously, what it's like at that level of the organization, but I think regardless, a lot of that ultimately has to fall on him. And it's been inconsistent. And I think that's a reflection of when you don't have a ton of experience in the job.
A quick take. I think if Story doesn't turn things around relatively soon, we see Meyer at short and they just figure out what to do with Story. Which, for
Probably.
someone who doesn't understand nuance, I'm sure that take surprises you guys from me. But the thing I think that bothers me the most about the Red Sox in this situation is in an age of baseball that values versatility, why in the hell have you told two players to just put their gloves away? They did it to Yoshida and they did it to Devers in spring training. It's just like to the point about like you should have prepared for this in spring training, but you were afraid of Tristan Casas, which is just absurd to me. It's like I don't get like last year they told Yoshida for no reason just put the glove away, don't even practice defense, and then they're like, well, we have no extra options in the outfield whenever Ref Snyder's not around. It's like, yes, you do. He's not that great, but he's competent there, and it's like we would take competency at first base, and so the fact that it was just like they're flying by the seat of their pants almost. It's like, how could you not forecast this potential issue that's like, all right, we now have nowhere to put Devers, we have no backup first baseman, and our first baseman can barely make it 100 games a season. Like the answer was right there. It's just it's clumsy. It's so clumsy, and I blame Cora for the way he operates on the day to day. But I think a lot of this is things that are out of his control because it's like, what can he do when he has to put Abraham Toro at first base when he's played 8 games there his whole life?
I don't know if it was all about not pissing off Tristan Casas. I think
Yeah,
the best
sure.
path for the Red Sox was having Devers either play third or DH, and then like trying to like get Tristan Casas out there and establish himself as your franchise first baseman and one of the key members of your lineup like that. And then you needed to play that out and see if that would work. And having him start platooning with Rafael Devers is just not a good way to accomplish that. Not to mention the fact that, like, in a world where maybe they want to look to trade him at the deadline or in the offseason, these teams do think about that stuff. If you start platooning him, you send a clear message to other teams that, you think he's a platoon player. And then they're able to go like, well, we're not going to offer you full value for a trade. And to kind of bring it back to Devers, because we've talked about how, like, I think a trade's totally on the table. Whether it be this season, probably not, but next offseason, like whether he asks out, like I can see that happening, or whether the Red Sox say this thing's too toxic, I don't know. But to kind of again bring it back to the Craig Breslow inexperience thing, they've shot themselves in the foot because there probably are still teams out there that would play Rafael Devers at third base. Teams that wouldn't really care. Maybe a team like the Dodgers or other teams that are competing where they're like, we'll put him at third. We don't care. But the Red Sox have already made it easy for them to say, like, well, you say he's a DH, so we're not going to trade a package that says he's a third baseman. So they've torpedoed some of his value. And again, that sort of falls on Breslow not thinking about this stuff ahead of time. So I just think that's one of those things, like, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think it's just going to be a huge storyline next offseason, how this all goes with Devers and whether or not we look back on it and say them making him a DH, hampered the return they were able to get, similar to how they shot themselves in the foot with Mookie Betts beforehand. So just obviously something to think of as the year goes on.